participant can join us. Yep. So now we have two attendees, three attendees, as you can see on
Okay.
the participant tab. Some students are writing in the chat, Doctor, as well.
Yeah.
And
Hello and welcome to today's session. I'm just going to wait for a few more minutes to give an opportunity for more attendees to join the session.
hi,
I hope
Doctor. We
you
are
had a good
we are
day.
live in the recording now.
Okay. I'll just share my screen and then we'll start the presentation. Right, good evening and welcome to today's webinar. The topic for today's discussion is stress, and we look at some coping strategies. It's not just enough to talk about what is stress. It's also important to discuss ways in which you can cope with stress. So that's what today's workshop will be focused on. Right, if you have any questions, perhaps you can write them down in the Q&A box, and then halfway through, maybe I will answer a few, and then at the end, I'll answer as many questions as I can. Right, I'm Dr. Shilpa Ayana from the College of Business, talking to you today about stress. So before I start, some basic facts about stress, as in what is stress exactly? Stress can be defined as the brain's response to any demands or changes that are in our environment. These the way we respond to any demands that is placed in our environment, and this can be triggered by change. And when we say change, it could either be positive or negative. It could be real, it could be perceived. Most often what happens is we have these what if scenarios going on in our mind, and it may never happen, but we are perceiving them. It's not real per se, right? So the demands we face could be recurring demands, short-term, long-term recurring demands, things that we face on a daily basis. Things like going to school. For example, just today, I think schools have started and children are going back to school. So there is this stress that parents perhaps are feeling, right? So with the commute that is involved for their children going to and from school, or going to work, depending on the country you are in, sometimes there's so much traffic and you're stuck in traffic jams for a couple of hours. So all of these could be recurring short-term kind of stress that you are exposed to. Change is important. The only thing constant in life is change. Right? And change can be mild, relatively harmless, like watching a scary movie or, winning a race. Riding a roller coaster. How many of you get stressed when you're sitting, to ride a roller coaster? Right? You can almost feel your heart beating, right? So these are small, mild, relatively harmless kind of changes. But then there are some changes that are major in our lives. Things like marriage, divorce, right? A serious illness. The last couple of months, actually, come February 28th or March 1st, it will almost be a year since the lockdown was announced, right? There are so many now restrictions that are placed on us because of this pandemic. So that could be a major, that really we've lived through some major changes in the last couple of months, right? So other changes are extreme, things like living in a war zone, right? And it could really cause very traumatic kind of reactions, and this then leads to what we would call post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, right? So when we talk about stress, basically we're talking about our brain's response to certain demands that we are faced with. And we just looked at the kind of demands that we're generally faced with. There are different definitions for stress. Different people have different views and ideas with regards to the definition of stress. The most common definition, perhaps, is the physical, mental, and emotional strain or tension that we are faced with. Another very popular definition for stress is a condition or feeling experienced when a person perceives that the demands that are placed on him or her exceed his or her personal social resources that the individual can mobilize, right? If you feel, sometimes you feel the sense of being so overwhelmed. You have so many deadlines to meet. All your assignments are due today. So how do you manage this? Then you feel you don't have enough time, right? So the demands to meet the assessment deadlines perhaps exceeds your resource with regards to how much time you have, right? So when we talk about a condition or feeling experienced when a person perceives that the demands exceed his or her personal or social resources, that could also lead to stress. Okay, that's another definition rather of stress. So stress is like our body's 999 system. It is sending out a signal. But what is important to understand is stress in and of itself is neither positive nor negative. It's our perception to the stimulus that determines whether the situation is stressful, right? See, some events are very exciting and pleasurable for some, and the same event for somebody else might be painfully stressful. So it's really our perception to the situation. Like, for example, riding a roller coaster for me is an extremely tense situation. When I'm standing in line, you can see like the blood drain from my face. But my children, on the other hand, are just so excited. So it's the same stimulus that both they and I are faced with. However, our reaction to it is very different, right? So how our body responds to these pressures and responsibilities and threats, whether it's real or imagined, is stress, right? Any kind of change that causes us to make adjustments, and therefore, how does our body react to that? That is stress, right? There are different types of stress. Now, a certain amount of stress is important because it helps us perform better, right? I've heard of colleagues who say, please give me a deadline. I work well with deadlines, right? So why? Because that deadline gives you that little bit of motivation, that little bit of stress that is important and necessary, perhaps, for you to do certain things, right? So there are different types of stress. When we talk about acute stress, we're talking about this flight or fight mode that our body gets into. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a bit, right? So this is where your body is preparing to defend itself. You either are ready to fight the situation or just, run from that situation. Then you have chronic stress. Chronic stress is, because of the constant day-to-day, the cost of day-to-day life, right? But if it's left uncontrolled, it affects our health. It affects our body, affects our immune system. Actually, any kind of stress, acute stress that is not taken care of will have a detrimental effect on our health, right? Eustress is that a stress in daily life that has a positive connotation. As I said, a certain amount of stress is important because it helps us. It almost pushes us to take action. It brings out sometimes the best in us, right? However, eustress, we should be careful to not let it become distress. Distress is when the level of stress has increased, and that's not going to help with performance. It's actually going to have a negative impact on performance. This graph here very sort of nicely explains that. When we're faced with eustress, our performance is at the peak. But then when we feel the pressure and we don't have the pressure or the demands are exceeding our resources, then we tend to start panicking. We tend to feel intense pressure, and then that sort of the eustress then sort of goes into distress, right? Stress in daily life that has very negative connotations. Negative connotations because it has a very adverse effect on our health, right, on our body, on our immune system. And especially in the pandemic, it has become very, very clear about how our health, our immunity is our wealth, right? Right. So I was talking, I said a few minutes ago that I will talk a little bit more about the flight and fight mode. So when we talk about the fight or flight mode, we're talking about the response in our body. It's one of the most basic responses. Sometimes an option that you have to survive in the presence of a threat is perhaps fighting back, or perhaps, going away. Right. Let me talk, as I said, let me talk a little bit more about the fight and flight mode. When we talk about, just a minute. Yeah. When we're faced with acute stress, our body gets into this fight or flight mode, right? And this fight or flight mode refers to the physiological reactions that occur when we are in the presence of something that is mentally or physically terrifying. Like, for example, you're going for a walk and suddenly you find yourself being chased by a dog. It's physically and mentally terrifying, right? So what are the physical changes that take place? What are the physiological changes that take place? What are the changes that take place to our body? Like, for example, your eyes become wider, your skin becomes very pale, right? Just a few minutes ago, I was talking to you about how, when I'm standing in line to go on the roller coaster, you can almost see the blood drain from my body. That's what I mean by pale or flushed skin, right? Your heart starts beating very, very rapidly. You're breathing, maybe in short breaths. You perhaps are breaking out in a sweat or trembling. So these are all physiological changes, physiological bodily changes that take place when we are faced in such a situation, right? The term fight or flight, actually, how did we come to this term? What does this actually mean? Long, long ago, our ancestors, when they were faced with a dangerous situation, they literally had just two options: either fight the threat or run away from that threat. They flee from the threat. That's how literally this term about fight or flight came into being, right? So when you're faced with a threat, in either case, right, the psychological and physical responses to stress as your body prepares to react to the danger, that is what is called the fight and flight mode. This term, fight and flight, was coined by a physiologist, Walter Cannon, in 1920. right? So what are some of the common causes of stress? Personal changes, right? Either starting or ending a relationship. I'm just going to take a few. I can see that somebody has written in the chat window. Let me see if I can access that. I can't. I'll have to stop sharing to access the chat. So maybe at the end, I'll take a break later on and talk about, answer your questions, right? So anyway, we were talking about what are some of the common causes of stress in our lives. Personal changes, whether it's illness, sometimes even winning a lottery can be, it's a personal change, but it can cause a lot of stress, right? Financial shifts, relationships, whether you're starting or ending a relationship, family changes in terms of a marriage or divorce, children, death, moving to a new location, a new job, new work changes, new job, new boss, this threat of unemployment. And I think many people, many folks have gone through this particular aspect, especially during the pandemic. Environmental changes that could have a detrimental effect in terms of what's happening currently in the world, the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. What else? Natural disasters, whether it's a flood or famine, right? So all of these could cause us to feel a certain amount of stress, and sometimes very acute stress that could then be termed as distress, right? If it continues for a long period of time. So what are some of the symptoms that we face? It could be emotional, it could be behavioral, it could be physical, cognitive, or in terms of relationships. When we talk about emotional symptoms of stress, we're talking about depression, general sense of unhappiness that we feel, anxiety, agitation, when you get angry very easily, and sometimes you feel you can almost see yourself getting angry with people or situations without a cause, feeling overwhelmed, loneliness and isolation. This pandemic we use the term social distancing, but sometimes I wonder if that's the right term, because we are human beings, we are social beings, we need social contact and interaction. So yes, I mean, considering the current pandemic, we have to be physically distant. That's the reality of today's world. But we can still be socially connected, can't we? Right? We have now technology is playing a big role in helping us stay connected. The other day I was doing a presentation on branding, and in the 2020 global best brands, for example, YouTube, Instagram, Zoom. These are social media companies that have done very extremely well in 2020 because they played a big role in helping us stay connected. And these three brands, for example, have entered the global best brands ranking for the first time in 2020. Right? So loneliness, isolation is indeed, one of those emotional symptoms of stress, right? Our mental and emotional health problems. When you find yourself just unhappy and sad all the time, sometimes breaking into tears for no reason. What are the behavioral symptoms of stress? Eating more or less. Have you heard of this term called stress eating? Right? I don't know if you watch movies, but then a movie comes to mind where this a mother of two children, she's so stressed, and every time she's stressed, you can see her just stuffing her her face with the cupcakes, right? Eating because of stress, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, right? Withdrawing from others, procrastination, putting things away for another day or another time, neglecting your responsibilities, excessive use of alcohol, cigarettes, to just feel, relaxed a bit, if that's your outlet. Nail biting, nervous habits like biting your nails is another symptom of stress. Right? What are the physical symptoms of stress? Nausea, dizziness, constipation, chest pain, rapid heartbeats, muscle tension, fatigue, this general, feeling, sense of weakness, weight loss, perhaps, right? Unexplained weight loss, pains and aches, almost psychosomatic. There's no physiological reason behind that, those aches and pains. Breaking out into, your skin conditions. If you're a teenager in that age category, sometimes you find yourself that when you're very stressed, perhaps towards the period of the exams, you break out, acne and stuff like that. That could also be, related to stress. Ulcers and gastric problems. These are all physical changes that could happen to our body as a result of stress, and could be a good indication that you are perhaps experiencing stress. Cognitive, your mental makeup, memory problems, this inability to remember things, inability to concentrate. You feel that they say that right now we have our memory, we have the memory span of a goldfish, apparently, because we're living in a socially connected world where we're just moving from one social media site to another, and we stay on a site as long as it holds our interest, and we're so quick to move, right? So I don't know, poor judgment, seeing only the negative, anxious and racing thoughts. Sometimes your mind is just, so active, thinking about so many things. And most often what happens is, what we're thinking about is these what if situations, constantly worrying that something will go wrong or something will happen. Some of the relationship related symptoms are this inability to cope with others' needs. Again, this sense of being overwhelmed with others' responsibilities, impatient, intolerant towards others, problems at home, perhaps because you're impatient and intolerant, wanting to be left alone, trying to control every movement and thought of the others, and this excessive need to rely on somebody else. Sometimes you hear people saying, don't be so clingy, right? So these are some of the symptoms of stress. So how vulnerable are you to stress? I have a short questionnaire that I would like you to answer. There are 20 questions. Please read. I'll give you about 5 or 10 minutes to answer this questionnaire. Please read the question, each statement, and on a scale of 1 to 5, give yourself some points, right? 1, if it's almost always. 5, it is if it's never. So please read each statement and rank them on a scale of 1 to 5. 1, if it's almost always. 5, if it's never, right? Once you've answered all 20, I want you to total up the score that you got. I'll give you about 10 minutes to answer these 20 questions. Right. So once you've answered the questions, please add the points, total up the points that you've given yourself, minus that total with that subtotal with 20. Right. And what's the answer that you get? If it's any number over 5, it indicates that you're vulnerable to stress. You are seriously vulnerable if your score is between 25 and 55. And you're extremely vulnerable if your score is over 55. So this questionnaire is a good indication to see, what your level, where are you in terms of your stress levels? How vulnerable are you towards getting, towards stress, right? The more vulnerable you are, the more you should be aware of the coping strategies that I will be talking about in a bit. Right? It's so difficult for me. Robert, can you please help me here? I want to see some of the statements that, the chat. Should I stop share and go to the chat window to do that?
No, doctor. On the top, there is a view option. And just you can select more option and just click the chat.
Yeah, I did that, but it didn't.
Are
You
you
see,
using a second monitor, doctor? Or just only one monitor?
only one. So perhaps I should stop share and then look at the chat, right?
Yes, doctor. Probably that is.
Okay. Let me see. 55. Oh, that's your score. Life is difficult. Life is difficult. I got whoever got 5, very good. 20 to 55, you're vulnerable. Over 55, you're extremely vulnerable towards stress. .46, vulnerable. Okay. Right, so let's just carry on now. Oops, sorry, somebody said something. Where's the test? Oh, okay, just give me a minute. Let me see if I... These are the test questions. Right, these 20 statements are the ones you have to read and answer. Give, like for example, I eat at least one hot balanced meal a day. If it's almost always, you give yourself 1 point. If it's never, then give yourself 5 points. Similarly, read each statement and rank each statement on a scale of 1 to 5, right? Then total up the scores that you've given yourself, minus that with 20, and then the answer that you get is what we're interested in. That answer, if it's anything above 5, it indicates that you're vulnerable to stress, right? And as I said, it's not a bad thing. The certain amount of stress is good. But if it's between 25 to 55, you are seriously vulnerable towards stress. Then this is where you have to find some ways of coping. If it's over 55, then you're extremely vulnerable towards stress. And it becomes absolutely essential for you to have some coping mechanisms. Otherwise, it could lead to very, to health issues and affect you in a very negative way, right? 20 minus 20, not 26. Or after you minus, it's 26. Well, that's good. Right. Okay. So let's carry on with this presentation. So what are some of the coping mechanisms for stress? How can you cope with stress? What are the strategies or ways in which you can cope with stress? So again, there are physiological ways you can do it. There are cognitive or emotional ways you can do it. And there's some actions that you can take. In other words, behavioral things that you can. When we talk about physiological, it's about trying to control your breathing. It sounds like a cliche when people say, if you're extremely upset, just take a deep breath. But it is really very helpful, right? Paying attention to your diet, exercising regularly, getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep, right? Trying to put yourself in, change your environment, try and put yourself in a more positive environment, try and find ways of relaxing. What do? Each one of us, it's a very individual journey. Each one of us are very different. What is it that helps you relax? Like, for example, I know people who draw, and that's very, very therapeutic. I run because that's where I find, I relax when I'm running. I know people who draw, I know people who write poetry, right? So what is it that works for you? A cognitive and emotional coping strategies, this is just at a glance, and then we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. Become more aware of your capabilities. Don't be scared to challenge yourself, right? Control your emotions. And again, breathing helps with that. Think positive. But thinking positive is actually a habit you can cultivate, right? Behavioral changes that you can do. Sometimes you should just act like you're relaxed, because that sends a message to your brain, and then you can actually find yourself relaxing, right? Working with others, don't feel overwhelmed. There's always somebody there to help you, right? Change your behavior, change your attitude, right? Let's look at the strategies in more detail, because this seems so abstract. Mindset, that's a big coping strategy, because it's our perceptions that influence our stress levels, right? So changing your mindset could help in addressing the stress before it even affects you. So this is a big thing, that big takeaway from here, because if you looked at in the very beginning, we spoke about what is stress, and by definition, we said it's our perception towards a stimuli. Some perceive the same stimuli is perceived differently by different people, right? For some, it's positive, for some, it's negative. So if we can change our mindset, that is a big coping strategy. Most things are truly out of our control. One of the simplest coping skills is addressing your mindset regarding stress. What can you do about it? There's nothing. Right now, I know a lot of parents are extremely worried and stressed about the fact that their children are going back to school. Is there something that you can do about it? If there is, then take appropriate action. If there isn't, then what else can you do? It's beyond your control. There's no point in getting stressed about it, right? So when you look at coping strategies, you can look at it from different perspectives. For example, trying to build your confidence. And these are really, I've asked the question because it's a very, very, individual journey. What can you do to increase your self-confidence? Read more, perhaps, right? Increase your knowledge, increase your awareness. People with positive feelings and thoughts about themselves tend to cope better with stressful situations or challenging situations. Take responsibility. External events, most events are external to us, but how we handle them will tell about how we are able to cope with stress. Right? Think positively. Take care of your physical health. I can't explain this or stress this enough. Physical activity, your diet, sleep, extremely important, right? Effective communication. As I said, there's always somebody there to help you. Learn to, approach others, talk to others, work well in a team, because each one of us has our own strengths, right? Together, when we come, we get the best. The whole then becomes more important than the sum of its parts, right? Be realistic when you set your goals. Create clear goals, realistic goals, so that you're not setting yourself up for disappointment. Neither are you, underachieving. Because when you challenge yourself a bit and you actually achieve that, there is this sense of um, of wonder, really, and this, you feel so good about yourself, right? So, but set clear, realistic goals for yourself. Go for a long walk. Yes, absolutely. Work out, pray. I like all what y'all are saying, music, meditation. Different people have different ways of, trying to find some ways to calm themselves, right? Yeah. So let's look at the strategies in more detail. In order to avoid unnecessary stress, it's very, very important for you to be able to say no. It's difficult, but it's a life lesson and a life skill to have this ability to say no. Avoid people, if possible, who stress you out. Take control of your environment. Avoid, topics that really are a trigger for your anger, right? Have a to-do list, because that, again, you feel less overwhelmed when you know exactly what to do. And then you feel the demands on your time or your resources perhaps is not so much, because you have a clear idea of what you have to do. Express your feelings. Talk to somebody, your mom, your siblings, a good friend, right? Or perhaps you can even express yourself by writing things out. It's very therapeutic when you can just get your feelings, and however that works for you, be willing to make some compromises in life, right? Be more assertive. You deserve everything that you want, but how you go about getting that is really up to you. Manage your time better. Don't procrastinate. Adapt to the stressors. And what do we mean by that? Reframe the problem. Look at the big picture. That the one thing I do and I tell my kids to do is ask. I always say this. Ask yourself this question: 5 years from now, is this important? If it is, then please take some action. If it isn't, then just forget about it. Right? You're very upset that your favorite meal was not cooked today. Fine. 5 years from now, will that make a difference? No. So what I mean, see, can you see what I'm trying to say? Just look at it, reframe your problem, right? Look at the big picture, adjust your standards, be more positive. At least you have a nice hot meal. It may not be your favorite meal, but it's a good, nutritious hot meal, right? Except that you can't change things, or most things can't change, right? Don't try to control the uncontrollable. If it's possible, really look for the positive in any situation. Share your feelings, learn to forgive. It sounds very preachy, but these are indeed very true, ways in which you can cope with stress. Because the more you have this feeling of anger and resentment towards others, you're doing yourself harm. The other person perhaps doesn't even know you have these extreme feelings. Make time for fun and relaxation. You are important. We tend to be so consumed by work that we pay very little attention to ourselves and our needs. You have to make time for yourself. You have to have fun. You have to relax. Just give me a minute. How can you control your negative thoughts? As I was saying, it's actually a habit that you can form. Every time a negative thought comes into your mind, visualize. I will talk about visualization in a bit, but nevertheless, let me just, you actually visualize yourself taking that negative thought out of your head and cutting it into small bits. See, what you're doing when you're visualizing is you're taking your mind away from something and focusing on something else, right? Breathing. I will talk about meditation and breathing in a bit, but let me just come to that. So connect with others, do something that you enjoy at least once a day. Even if it's just, putting your your face out to the sun, that's enough. If that's what you enjoy, then do that. Keep a sense of humor. Life is too short to be angry and upset all the time. See the fun side of things. See, what are the things you can do to have fun and relax, right? Go for a short walk. Spend time with nature, even if you have just a small, potted plant, just go in and spend time. Prince Charles talks to his plants. Apparently, it's very good both for Prince Charles and the plants, right? Call a friend, talk to a friend, a family member, or somebody, work out. You don't necessarily have to spend money and go to the gym. One of the things that the pandemic has taught us is that we don't necessarily have to go to the gym to get fit. We can just walk around or run around or, do our own thing, stretching exercises and stuff like that. Right, if that's what helps you, right? A warm cup of tea or coffee. If you have a pet, spend some time with your pet. Take the pet for a walk, right? Gardening, getting a massage perhaps, listening to music. And I read all of these in the chat. You all were talking about this: praying, listening to music, dancing. If these are the things that help you, then this is what you should do, right? Adopt a healthy lifestyle. I'm coming back to this again. And how can you do that? By exercising regularly, eating healthy, reducing your sugar and caffeine intake, completely avoid things like cigarette, alcohol, and drugs. Make sure that you get enough sleep, right? Make a few lifestyle changes by eating well, eating food that's fresh, eating regular meals, eating slowly, chew your food, right? Don't overeat. Hydrate, drink a lot of water. Yeah. Increase your healthy habits such as sleeping more, spending time to have fun, recreation, stretching. Find a balance in life. That's really, really important. Yeah. Relaxing techniques, as I was saying, there are lots of ways in which you can actually relax. Yeah. Oops, sorry. Abdominal breathing is one way. Abdominal breathing, just to tell you what I mean, put your hand, like this on your belly, right? And breathe in. When you're breathing in, think of a balloon, yeah? When you blow air into the balloon expands, correct? So our lungs is like the balloon. So when we breathe in, air is going into our body, so our lungs has to expand. And the best way to notice that is if you place your hands on your belly. So when you breathe in, your stomach should expand, and when you breathe out, your stomach should contract, should go in, right? So just take deep breaths. Take a deep breath inside and make sure that your belly is out. Hold it for a few seconds and then breathe out. When you're breathing out, your stomach has to go in, and all the body air should come out of your body, right? So this is what we call an abdominal breathing, right? Actively, focusing on different muscles in your body and sort of trying to relax yourself. Visualization, as I was saying, visualize things, actually try to see how things are happening, right? Meditation, closing your eyes and focusing just on your breathing, right? Somebody was asking about how to get rid of those negative thoughts. Meditation is a good way. Yes, I mean, it all requires practice. Nothing happens overnight. But, today perhaps you'll be able to do one deep breath without any thoughts in your mind. Tomorrow, perhaps two. And then slowly you'll see that you'll be able to spend at least 5 minutes just focusing on your breath. It takes time, but it's not impossible. Listening to music, stretching and exercising, these are all different ways in which you can relax. Have you seen people boxing sometimes? You say, you just need to get that excessive energy out of your system, right? Yoga, yes. Unhealthy ways of coping with stress. Perhaps we're guilty of this. Eating too much, drinking, overeating or undereating. Yeah, just zoning out for hours in front of the TV. Nowadays, it's not the television, but you're spending hours on your phone, right? Withdrawing from family and friends. It's very easy to just not do anything, It takes effort to go out, and you have to do that so that there is some social contact and interaction. Sleeping too much. Sometimes I see kids who are just lying on their bed the whole day with the phone. I mean, that's really, really sad. This is the age when you have so much energy. Just run out, go play, do something. Don't just lie on your bed with your phone. Lashing out on others because you're angry. Yeah. Sometimes what we do is, just to avoid facing our problems, we tend to just be doing so many other things. And we have to take courage. We have to take responsibilities for our action. So we've come to the end of this session. Please take, now that you know what is stress and what are the different ways in which you can cope about it, just think about it, reflect, and write down on a piece of paper at least 3 changes that you're willing to make for yourself to make your life a bit better. Do you have any questions with today's session? Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to all of you. I hope there's at least one thing that you will take away from today's presentation and make it a habit. If you could make one lifestyle change, what would it be? Maybe you can share your thoughts in the chat box. What would you do? Routine. Yes, it's important to have a routine. Thank you, Marco. Sleep better. Yes. Perhaps, breathing just before you go to bed is a good way of trying to get a good night's sleep. Right. Take care. Don't stress too much. Yeah. And it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.